The UN Security Council has received a firm admonishment from the head of the Church of England for allowing national interest to overcome the wisdom of those who have lived through wars and conflicts.
The Archbishop of Canterbury was invited by the United Kingdom in its capacity as President of the Council to address the body during an open debate on mediation and the peaceful resolutions of the conflicts. The debate intended to provide member states with the opportunity to consider just how the role of the United Nations, both the secretariat and its collective parts, can be strengthened in both leading and supporting inclusive mediation efforts.
The Syrian conflict in its 8th year continues despite intensive mediation efforts with close to 500,000 dead. The Central African Republic has suffered overlapping national and local conflicts for decades. Generations of South Sudanese have only known war. The Archbishop of Canterbury serves on the Secretary-General's high-level advisory board on mediation.
There are and always will be profound differences amongst and within nations. But the terms on which those differences are dealt with look very different today to 70 years ago. We have avoided global nuclear war, yet not its continuing menace. Yet today the international rule-based order is struggling. National interests are still too often allowed, even in this chamber, to overcome the wisdom that those who had lived through a global war had learned. Without dealing with even passionate disagreement peacefully, no national interest can prevail. Short-term advantage for one interest leads to long-term destruction for all.
The Archbishop said reconciliation had to be at the centre of mediation efforts, using an analogy that mediation in and of itself was like using a garden hose to put out a forest fire when rain all over is what is required to let new life grow and sustain itself. Reconciliation, he warned, should not be an act that comes at the end of the conflict cycle, but rather be the framework that sustains peace and avoids conflict cycles repeating themselves. He also pointed out that religious institutions are often the only functioning organizations in a fragile or pre-conflict situation.
A British football coach, the manager of Liverpool, once famously told his team to get their retaliation in first. If we are to transform conflict, we need instead to get our reconciliation in first. I ask you, are the approaches to reconciliation currently adequate, especially using local, religious and traditional sources of peacemaking? Even in this time of uncertainty and renewed international rivalry, for the sake of future peace, we must invest in reconciliation and learn how to support transformation in human relationships.
This civil society activist from Pakistan pointed to the role of women in mediation as key to its success.
So often we hear that women's exclusion is cultural, that women cannot play a mediation role in a particular conflict because of local cultural factors. But if that were the case, surely there would be vast differences between, say, Nepal and Colombia. They are hardly of the same culture. Women's exclusion is not about culture, it's about power.
The complexity of modern-day conflicts, often including localized and non-state actors, is placing peace that much more out of reach. Bryce-Pease, SABC News.